For the railroad companies, the oil industry was a tremendous source of business, as miners needed to get oil from wells to refineries, and refiners then needed to get it to the big cities. However, when Standard Oil began laying a vast network of pipelines all across America's eastern shore, the railroad companies were faced with the fact that one of their most important customers was making them obsolete. So Tom Scott, the owner of the Pennsylvania Railroad, decided to lay his own pipelines. But he also did something he knew John wouldn't like. He started building his own oil refineries. Now, Scott was in direct competition with John, so John interpreted this as declaration of war. He decided to launch an all-out attack against America's most powerful company.
What's up guys, welcome back to the next tutorial. Today we're going to go through one of the story animations that I did for one of Magnate Media's more recent videos, the Rockfeller video. This is a pretty involved animation that involves a lot of the elements that we spoke about already. So as you can see, there's a lot going on in that animation, but what we're going to do is we're going to break it down and hopefully make it nice and simple for you guys to follow along. So let's dive in. The first thing that we need to do is we're going to take the audio file that we have received from Magnates Media and we're going to drag it into Premiere Pro. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to transcribe the sequence, and from there I can kind of come up with ideas and concepts and animations. We're going to click our audio file. We're then going to go to our text panel, head over from captions over to transcript, and it should just say transcribe. And that's all you got to do. Just click the transcribe button. Lovely, let it do its work. And as you can see, we've got a transcript of the whole audio file. We're going to head back over to captions, and there should just be create captions from transcript. We're just going to press that, drop down and go subtype default, and we're just going to create that caption track. And as you can see, we have a Premiere sequence with completely transcribed audio. So from here, we can start building up some ideas of what we think might be good for the animations.
For the railroad companies, the oil industry was a tremendous source of business.
So for the railroad companies, immediately we need to see a train. That makes sense. Tremendous source of business. Miners need to get oil from refineries,
and refiners then needed to get it to the big city.
So it makes sense for me to have a train and have it pass some miners, pass refineries, go into the big city. That makes sense to me. So that is the animation we're going to be creating. I'm going to put that into a text layer. I'm going to say call this slate 1. So this is the first image that we're going to see, and we're going to call this train travel along tracks. We're going to track right, so the camera is going to be moving along with the train, and as it tracks right, it's going to pass miners and then track right again. As you can see, I'm already thinking about how the camera is going to move as well in our final animation, because it's important to make sure we're considering these things all the way along. Track right, and then we're going to pass oil refineries. Okay, so we've got the thing we're going to animate here. Train travels along the tracks, and then we've got our where the camera's moving, and then maybe transition off. We don't have to be specific with exactly what we're doing here. Like, we're trying to come up with ideas. So if I'm just going to write transition there because I don't know exactly how that transition is going to look. For now, it's fine to just be kind of vague, but we know it's something we know we need to address. So great, and I think that is our first idea.
For the railroad companies, the oil industry was a tremendous source of business, as miners needed to get oil from wells to refineries, and refiners then needed to get it to the big cities. However, when Standard Oil began laying a vast network of pipelines all across America's eastern shore...
Right, and that one's obvious as well to me. I think laying a network along America's eastern shore, that clearly needs to be, we'll call it slate 2, that needs to be a map animation, because we need to see where Standard Oil is laying their pipelines. And then we know we need to transition out. Cool. So as you can see, all I'm doing here is just coming up with some ideas that might be useful, that we're going to implement once we go into After Effects. We don't really want to get into After Effects and be guessing at what we're doing and how we're going to be doing it. So guys, what I've done is I went through and I've added text layers to all of our 38 seconds that we're looking to animate here. But there's various ideas like screen 3 or slate 3 making obsolete. So I'm obviously underlining keywords that are being said in the subtitles in the audio, and then intro to Pennsylvania Rail Company we're going to push in, and then we're going to reel Rockfeller above the railroad company, all powerful, maybe some flames, stuff like that. And yeah, I've done this for the whole 38 seconds. So now it is a matter of going into After Effects and beginning the animation process. I'm going to cut into my audio at the end of where our text layers are. I'm going to highlight everything, and I'm going to go place of After Effects composition. That's going to take us over to After Effects. So what's happened here is that some of our text layers have been separated off. We will have to clean this up a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Next thing to do is to find assets. We're going to find some stuff that we know we're going to need. So I'm going to start looking for images of Rockfeller. So if you find that you are unable to find images that are super high quality, which can be the case for, say, Rockfeller, who was around in the 1900s, and you know there wasn't as many high quality, high resolution cameras available back then, you can take a lower res image and you can go to imgupscaler.com, which is an AI enhanced software, and it's completely free. It will simply upscale your images using AI. So now we have our high-res images, we have our compositions in After Effects, and we have the ideas generated for what we're going to be animating. I'm going to start cutting out subjects from images. So I've got this photo of a miner, which I've upscaled, and I have brought into Photoshop. So I'm going to go to Select in the top panel. I'm going to go to Subject, and Photoshop will give you an outline around what it thinks is the subject of the shot. It's done a pretty good job here. There's a few mistakes. As you can see, the bucket has the space between his arm and the bucket hasn't been cut out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my brush tool, I'm going to press B, and then I go to my layer, and I click the layer mask and not the actual image. Just going to click the layer mask, and I'm going to make sure I have a black brush selected. What we're doing with this layer mask tool is we're essentially seeing only the areas of the image which we've painted white, which is what how Photoshop has cut out our subject. And now we're just using a black brush to just tweak some of the data that Photoshop has put into the layer mask. So select a black brush, and then we're just going to paint in this area, and as you can see, the inside of his arm is just disappearing. Do this with a few other images. For instance, I know I need a train. As an extension of the photo cutting out process, I know we're going to need some compositing of photos. I struggle to find, I want to have an animation of like kind of a miner, kind of like, you know, bringing his pickaxe down, but I couldn't really find anything, one that was high res enough, and two that was in the exact position that I needed it to be. So what I did find is I found a bloke who was holding a hammer, which is pretty close. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start compositing him so he has a pickaxe, and instead of looking at the camera, which is a bit creepy, I'm going to get him looking forward, and I'm going to add a little hat to him as well, a little builder's hat. So how am I going to do that? So I've got my original image, and I've cut him out. I've cut him from the background, and I'm going to start adding in other images that I've got off the internet. So this is a pickaxe, in case you didn't know. I'm going to line it up with where the hammer is, just get nicely kind of in position. Sometimes toggling off the opacity will help line this up properly. So I'm just going to use the layer mask tool to kind of put this pickaxe behind our friend the miner's hands. I think that's the key thing to know here. Like, you don't always need your cutouts and photos composites to be perfect. Like, they can look a little bit stylistic, and once we lump it into a greater composition, you really like you can get away with quite a lot. So don't, as you can see, like his arm looks a little bit, doesn't look the best, and you know, there's areas of the pickaxe that aren't incredible, but that's fine for our purposes in this video. I need to give this guy a new head, and it's with a different hat, because miners have pretty specific hats, and I want to be able to include that. I found a nice picture of a miner. I'm going to drag that into position and start kind of scaling it about right. I'm lowering my opacity and kind of trying to line up the neck with our the body of our current composite. It just takes a little bit of time to kind of like nudge these into position just to make sure that they're right. So I think I'm happy with where it is. Now it's a matter of just blending the colors. I can, for instance, what I'll do is I'll add an adjustment layer, brightness and contrast, maybe some hue and saturation, and I'll hold Alt and I'll click my adjustment layer, and that will mean that the effects will only be affecting the immediately below layer, so that's the miner's head. We don't want it to start up in the saturation and brightness of the original body we had. So let's tweak the brightness and contrast, let's tweak the saturation. I might also add a feather between the bottom of the neck and the body underneath. So just go to right click, go to hardness of the brush, and just drop it down to 0, and then just kind of like brush away your edges within the layer mask. Again, it doesn't look amazing. Like, it's not, you're never gonna get that on a poster, but once it's edited into the composition, I really feel like that will sell the effect, and it will look pretty good. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to add a little light to his hat, because then we can like kind of have some like flares and stuff going off it if we want. Same story as before. We're going to drag the an image that I've got off of Unsplash, Pexels, or Google into our Photoshop layer, and I'm just going to mess around with the layer mask and brush away the edges of the composition. So there's another image that I know I'm going to need to composite a little bit, and I know I'm going to need a train. As you can see, I've cut this one out. It's got some carriages at the back. What it originally had was 2 carriages, so I've cut out the carriages and I've basically stacked them all behind each other, so we've got a few extra to work with. So now we've got our train composited. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it into After Effects. Lovely. And I'm going to they're going to be in their new composition called Train. You see all the layers are here, and what I'm going to start by doing is bringing in a null layer. This is a layer that's just going to help me kind of nudge my train easily around my composition. We'll make a new layer and null layer, and we're going to go to Train all the way down to Back Carriage, and we are going to parent them to the null. And now, as you see, if you want to increase the scale or change the position, you just kind of nudge around the null and the train will follow. What I'm going to do now is I want to see the carriages kind of like bumping up and down, because that's kind of what train does. It's kind of like chug, chug, chug. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my front carriage. Let's start with that one. I'm going to hit position. P for position. I'm going to separate my dimensions, because I just want to be isolating the Y value. What I'm going to do is I'm going to alt-click my Y value, and I'm going to add an expression. I'll go to JavaScript maths, and I'm going to go maths.sign value. I'm going to highlight my value, and I'm going to type in, I'm going to do 20 times math.sign and highlight my value and put time. That's going to throw my carriage up to the top of the composition. That is fine. It just means I've got to add an extra little piece to my expression. I basically need to set the 0 point as to its current Y value. So that is 1429.3. So I'm going to type into my composition 1429.3 plus math.sign time. We went over expressions before, but just as a little recap, what I'm doing here is I'm saying that the Y value is equal to 1429.3, which is where my my carriage currently is. So that's a sort of our 0 point, and then I'm adding on a sine function to the value. So sine functions essentially go between 0 and 1, and they do so in regular intervals. So it's a function of time. So as the time continues, the function will go sort of like up and down, up and down, up and down. So we can use that as a multiplier to kind of see our carriage kind of chug up and down at regular intervals given by this sine function. We just need to add some multipliers at the start and within the function to kind of govern how high the carriage will chug up and down and how fast it will do it. So if we do say 50 times math.sine time, what we're going to do is we're going to see the carriage go up and down by 50 pixels. And if we're to do math.sine of time times 50, we're going to see it go up and down by 1 pixel, but 50 times a second. So we're just going to add some values into this depending on kind of how fast and how high we want the carriage to chug away. I think I'm going to go with, I don't know, say 20. So we'll do 20 times math.sine time, close off those brackets on either side. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, not bad. That looks pretty good. It's just a bit slow. So let's maybe times that by, I don't know, 3. See how fast that goes up and down. I could maybe do a little bit more, or just a little bit more on the frequency and a little bit less on the height. So I've went 10 times math.sine time times 6. That looks pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy with that. I know I'm going to need some wheels, and wheels are going to help really sell this effect. It's going to be the main thing kind of animating on the train. There might be some smoke. There may be some other stuff going on, but the wheels really will bring the whole thing together. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to make a new composition and call that train wheel. My plan is for this to make them a little bit 3D because that will help the it'll just make the whole effect a little bit more impressive, a bit nicer to look at. So now I've cut out my wheels. I will drag it into After Effects. I'm going to bring it into After Effects, drag it into my wheel composition. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a texture and I'm going to make that replace the wheel's detail with the texture that I can get from, say, Unsplasher Pexel. So now I've got my texture, I've got it, I'll bring it into After Effects. And I'm going to add a track matte. I'm going to duplicate my wheel layer and I'm going to go to my texture layer. I'm going to make it the track matte be layer 6, the duplicate of my wheel. And as you can see, now the texture can only be seen where the wheel is. But now I need to mess around with the blending mode of the texture, just so it looks, it starts to come through nicely on top of the wheel. So we'll mess around with, darken looks quite nice, but maybe let's try multiply. Multiply is nice. Yeah, let's stay with multiply. So, and just to kind of get rid of those kind of ghastly reds and blues, I'm going to go to hue and saturation. I'm going to drag that onto my bottom wheel layer. I'm going to whack the saturation down. I'm going to mess around with the lightness, and that will pretty much finish off the wheel. I think that looks pretty nice to me. Pretty happy with that. I'll pre-compose that and call it my wheel flat layer. Because now we're going to make the wheel 3D, which really is a matter of stacking a bunch of this same layer, this same wheel layer on top of each other, so eventually you get kind of, you simulate thickness by just adding several 1 pixel layers on top of each other. But let's have a look, I'll show you what I mean. This is super easy to do, but just to warn you, it is going to be super CPU intensive. Your computer is not going to like what we're about to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate dimensions on my wheel flat layer and make sure we've toggled on our 3D layer. We're going to go to our Z position on our wheel, and I'm going to alt click it and I type in index. And that's it. That's all you need to do. You need to press index and then you just need to duplicate this layer a bunch of times. If we press C and go to our camera tool, we'll start to see this effect working. So we can see we've now got a 3D wheel kind of emerging. I'm going to take this wheel layer, this now 3D wheel layer. I'm going to bring it into our train layer. I'm going to bring it to the top. And I'm going to click this button here. It looks like a little cog next to our little shy guy friend. I'm going to click the cog, and that simply means it's going to bring the 3D properties of the layer in from the layer above. So now when we manipulate the wheel, it is going to be completely 3D. So now it's just a matter of dragging it about where we want it on the train and to the size that we want it. As we can see, we've got the train wheel in position. But it's not animating yet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some rotation. So I'm going to go through to my wheel layer. I'm going to parent everything to a new null, and I'm going to go to the rotation of the null. and I'm simply gonna set keyframes, and I'm going to make it spin around quite a lot over the course of, say, 10 seconds. We'll go down to quarter quality because, as I say, this is pretty intense for your computer. The wheel is now spinning and it's 3D. I'm going to mask around part of the train and bring them in front of the wheel just by duplicating the train layer and masking over these metal bits, just because it adds a little bit of extra depth and sells the effect. So now the wheels are in position. I know I'm going to have to add what's known as a coupling rod back onto the wheels. And to do this, I've simply cut one out in Photoshop. I'm bringing it into After Effects, and I am animating manually the position of the coupling rod just to match the wheels and their rotation speed. I'm going to duplicate that as well because I know I'm going to need 2 coupling rods. I'm just going to change the color with the hue and saturation tool just so they match the color of the wheels I've selected. So now, as you can see, we have a train that's chugging along. It's got wheels spinning and a lot of other good stuff happening. So, but we can add a bit more, I think, to make it a little bit more interesting. There's a spout there for steam to come out. So I'm going to go to Story Blocks. I'm going to download a smoke rising effect, and I'm going to bring it into After Effects. And it really is just a matter of kind of placing it in position behind your train layer, essentially. I'm also going to add a little bit of flaring to the fog light at the front of the train, just because I think that'll be quite cool. We're going to press Command Y. We're going to make a new white solid, and we're going to mask it into a circle, and we're going to drag that on top of our light. And as you see, it looks a bit naff at the minute, but if we mess around with the blender modes and the size and maybe a couple of these layers, we're really going to start to see it looking a little bit more interesting. So I've changed the blender mode to overlay on the bottom, and then I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'm going to make the top white solid. I'm going to put that back down to a regular blender mode. Just put it down to normal, and I'm going to kind of like stretch it out so it's more like an oval, so you kind of get like I suppose like an anamorphic flare rather than a traditional kind of like spherical lens flare. I've just added that to the front of the train, and the lower the white solid underneath, I'm just tweaking that so it kind of just adds an overall little glow rather than it being the main kind of flare. And I'll probably just mess around with the feathering and the opacity, and make sure we bring our white solids right to the front of the composition. Otherwise they're going to be caught behind other layers that we don't want them to be caught behind. If we toggle on the transparency grid, we can actually see that when we drag the smoke layer into After Effects, it still has this black background, and we need to cut that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Effects, I'm going to go Luma Key, I'm going to drag that onto the smoke layer, and I'm going to key out darker, and I'm just kind of going to mess around with the threshold and the feathering just to make sure that the black is gone from the composition. Now I'm going to go to right click, I'm going to put a new adjustment layer in. I'll add on a posterized time, bring that down to 24, bring that down to 12 frames per second. I'm going to start color grading this overall image because I want it to look like a sepia image. I want it to look like an old kind of photograph or something, animated photograph. So let's go to Lumetri. Let's drag that onto our adjustment layer, and let's down the saturation to 0 straight away. Sepia photos generally tend to have kind of like that orange tint to them. Yeah, down the saturation, I'm going to add a tint layer. I'm going to drag that onto my adjustment layer. I'm going to map from onto white. I'm going to map orange, but an ever so slightly off orange color. I'm going to add on a texture that'll make this train look a little bit more vintage. So I went to Unsplash, and I've got this old kind of papery look. The first thing to do now that we've got our texture in there is to pre-compose our train layer. So this, we'll call this train no overlay, and then we'll do a standard track matte, which is as a matter of duplicating our train layer, putting our texture layer underneath the top train layer, and going to track matte, and then making the track matte on train no overlay the layer above it. So as you can see, we now have this texture coming through, and if we change our blender mode to say overlay, that'll look really nice. And yeah, that should really come together now. I'm now going to add a little bit of an animation to the lens flare that we've got on our train. So the way to do that is to go to your train layer, is to find your white solids, and it's to click your opacity, alt-click your opacity and go wiggle 1030. 10 times a second, we're going to vary the opacity by 30%. So that'll essentially, if we start on 70, that'll go between 100 and 40%. And if I do that with the top layer as well, so let's have a little look what we've got now of our train layer. Okay, there we go, guys. So we've got our train completed, and now I can start adding it into a scene. What we're going to do to help our computer out a little bit, given that we've got 3D layers at work here and a lot of things going on, I'm going to pre-render this train composition as an alpha, just so I can easily manipulate it in my next composition. I'm going to go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. I'm going to click that, and I go to, and then where it says channels, it'll say RGB. Click the RGB, and we want to do RGB and alpha. And then it is just a matter of pressing render and letting that do its job. So we have our train there, which has been exported. And I've started placing some layers in a 3D space. I know I'm going to need a train track. So what I've done is I downloaded a train track image, a bird's eye view, and I twisted it in 3D space. I put it down. And instead of using a 3D camera on this one, I'm going to manually move the objects in space. So what I kind of want is the camera to follow the train almost exactly. So it's almost like the train isn't moving. It'll be like everything else is moving around the train. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keyframe my train track layer to move underneath the train really fast. So it's almost like everything else is moving around it, and then the train is almost stationary. And now, as you can see, it looks like we've got a train on a track. It'll take a little bit more tweaking to get right, but this is essentially the premise of our effect. I'm just adding in the background and then kind of having it just crawl across the screen, given that it's so far away. That is the key here. Like, there'll only be a little bit of parallax because it's, you know, it's the furthest object in the scene. So we'll just animate the background from right to left. Cool. So we now have what looks like a bit of a scene. Looks like it's starting to come together. And I'm just going to tweak the position of the train as it moves across the screen. So it comes in fast, slows down, and then it's going to speed off. And it really just is just a matter of kind of tweaking my keyframes and my my graph editor to make it look natural. So now we're going to go on to we're going to add some miners to the shot. Lovely. So we've got our composited. We've got our man who has been composited. To make the pickaxe raise up, we're going to have to isolate this guy's arms, and I'm going to name one right arm and one left arm, and I'm going to use the content aware tool and the layer mask tool to fill in the space on the front of the body where the arm was. So as the guy raises his arm out with the pickaxe, we're not just going to reveal where the arm was originally, so we need to kind of fill up that space with kind of just body image. So we'll drag it in and we'll make a composition with it, miner with pickaxe, and as you can see, we've got all the layers. We've got a helmet torch, we've got a miner's head, we've got arms, we've got body, and we've got pickaxe. I'm going to parent the pickaxe to the front arm, and it really is just a matter of moving my anchor point of my front arm to the shoulder joint, and then just animating a keyframe in my rotation value. And the pickaxe, given that it's parented to the front arm, should follow the position and the trajectory of the arm. So as you can see, it's moving up and down. As you can see, this back arm doesn't have any information behind where the front arm was covering it. So that won't work so well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that back arm. I'm going to duplicate the front arm, because that has a complete arm without any information loss. I'll duplicate it, and I'm going to flip it. And I'm going to nudge it into the right scale and the right rotation, just to kind of get it into where it needs to be. And there we go. We got the arms moving the pickaxe up and then hitting it back down. And I think the body needs to move as well a little bit. because obviously hitting a pickaxe is more than just an arm exercise. So I'm going to get the helmet torch, pair that to the miner's head because I don't want them to move independently of each other. I'm going to take the miner's head. I'm going to move his anchor point to the neck, so it we can make it look like his neck is coming back. I'm going to keyframe the rotation on that. Lovely. It looks like the neck is coming up as he goes to pick up the pickaxe. Lovely. And then down as he drops the pickaxe. I'm going to go to the body. I'm going to take the anchor point of the body and keyframe the rotation. Remember to parent your miner's head to the body as well. Otherwise, the body is going to move independently of the head, and that is not what we want. Now we're going to just rotate the body along the motion of the pickaxe. So it kind of looks like it's a whole body exercise. And as I've said before, guys, it really is just about these micro animations that kind of help sell the overall animation. So let's have a look at that in full. There we go. It's a pickaxe dude pickaxing and doing stuff. Cool. So let's just do some ease into those keyframes. There we go. Perfect, perfect. I'm going to add a black solid. And I'm going to add a duplicate the miner with the miner's outline, the miner layer, and I'm going to do a track map, which is going to show the black layer only where the miner can be seen. And then I'm just going to play around with the opacity a little bit so I can get a little bit of detail in of the miner, but not heaps and heaps. I might even feather the black solid, just so it looks like it's kind of like light hitting his back rather than it being just a straight up silhouette. Great, and I might even add a texture to my miner layer just to make it look a little bit more interesting. We've got the one that we used for the train. It'd be good to be uniform with that, and I'll do that with a track map like usual. Let's animate the texture to make it look a little bit more like it's jittering a little bit. So we'll just kind of keyframe the rotation. We'll go 90, 180, 270, 360, and we'll loop that. Make sure to toggle the whole keyframes on. Now it's just a matter of bringing our miner layers into our top composition, our chapter 5 slate 1 composition, and essentially dotting them about the scene. If we make sure they're 3D layers and just kind of manipulate them in 3D space, then we can literally just place them where we want them to be. I'm going to parent the miner to the train track layer, so the miner will move along with the train track layer at the correct pace. And then yeah, it's just a matter of finding kind of where the best place to put these miners are. I'll duplicate him a few more times and just spread him around the scene. So now we have our train moving along the tracks, and we have a bit of foreground and background information in the miners who are passing the screen. As you can see at the minute, the entire screen doesn't really match. It's all kind of like a collage of things. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of try and uniform everything. So I'm going to take this texture that I've got from Unsplash, and I'm going to put it on top of all the background elements. So the train track, the mountains, all that stuff, to make the background have a little bit more life to it. I've also animated the texture. I've got it to rotate 90 degrees, and that's just making it look like the texture sort of adjusting over time. And I'm just gonna add a blender mode essentially. That's sort of tying everything together, which is exactly what I want. So I do still think there's maybe too much saturation in the scene, so I think I will add an adjustment layer just to kind of unify the colors a little bit more, maybe kind of make them a bit more sepia. And I think the best thing I can do is just take the adjustment layer from my train layer, which I've already done, and put that over everything. And so we might just want to tweak it a little bit to make it to match this the setting. I'm going to go to my mountain layer, and because it's so far in the background, I want to simulate a sort of a depth of field on my image. Obviously, the further away in the background the image is, the more out of focus it's going to be. So I'm going to go to my mountain layer, and I'm going to add a Gaussian blur, and I'm just going to kind of crank that up a little bit, make it look like the mountains are a bit out of focus. There we go, that's looking nice. There we go, lovely. And that really helps to make the train kind of feel a bit more isolated in the scene, so we know where to focus our attention. I'll go ahead and add a vignette as well. So if we press Command Y and press M, get the ellipse tool and do a little mask, add some feather. I'm also going to add a particle effect, which I'll just drag into my composition, pop it on the top, and I will mess around with the blender mode, probably screen for this. There we go. So we've got some particles in the scene. That looks interesting. And I think I've decided that I'm going to, I'm actually going to change the background, because mountains actually kind of evoke kind of like a free kind of like, you know, beautiful terrain, and you know, it's not really the vibe we're trying to strike on this. This actually needs to feel a bit more gritty, a bit more industrial. So I've tracked down on the old interweb an image of an old oil refinery. Here we go, and I'm just putting that in the background instead. And I think I'm going to replace, and I've just replaced the mountain background with the new image. I still think there's more we can put in this to make it feel a little bit more alive. So what I've done is I've went ahead and I've went to the internet, and I've got myself one of those drills that they use in oil refineries. I'm essentially going to cut out this drill now. I could mask around it. That's one way to go, but I might take a bit of time. So I'm going to see if I can get away with using a luma key, because there's a high contrast in this scene, so it might be easy enough to kind of cut out. So if I go key out brighter and then mess around with the threshold, that looks pretty good. I just toggle on the transparency grid so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Just want to hit that sweet spot where I'm kind of getting rid of all the sky, or as much as possible, not seeing any of this fringing, without actually cutting into the darks in the drill. So that's looking pretty good to me on a threshold of 83. And then I think I'll just do kind of what we call a garbage matte, and it's just going to, it's just a broad mask, which is just going to kind of like cut out everything else in the shot. So yeah, let's just cut that out with a very like primitive mask. Cool. So now that I've cut out the parts of my drill that I want, what I want to do is I want to isolate the actual pendulum from the stand of the drill, because I want to kind of animate it just up and down, up and down. I've duplicated the layer, and now I'm just going to mask out the bits of the top image that I don't want, which will be the stand, the ladder, and then I'm going to do the opposite for the other image. Cool. So now it's really simple to animate this. I'm just going to get my anchor point of my top layer, my drill arm, and I'm going to move it to the point where the arm would rotate. That'll be just at the top of the legs, and then yeah, it really is just a matter of kind of keyframing your rotation to kind of give that animation of kind of the drill coming down, coming back up, and then up, down, back up. I'm going to do this with an expression. So I'm going to alt click on rotation, and I'm going to go 30 times, hit JavaScript math, and then go sine again. I think we're going to do math sine time divided by 5. And again, all that essentially means is that we're going to fluctuate the rotation value of the arm by 30 degrees, both positive 30 degrees and negative 30 degrees, at a rate of a math sine time over 5, which means it will do a whole rotation from down, up, back to the center, once every 5 seconds. That looks pretty good. And then we're going to go ahead and place our drills into our top composition now, our chapter 5 slate 5 composition. And it's exactly the same fashion as we did with the miners. We're just going to make them 3D layers and move them around in Z space, and tweak the X and Y values and play around with the scaling as well. Do remember to parent the drill to the ground layer as well, just so our drills will match the movement of the train track layer. I'm going to add one quite severely to the foreground because it will make the shot feel a bit fuller. There we go, that's looking pretty good. I just need to move it back a little bit. I also need to add a Gaussian blur to the drill closest to the camera because again, depth of field, if that is that close to the camera and the train is in focus, it's very unlikely that the drill itself will be in focus. So we're going to add a Gaussian blur to it and just kind of like tweak that to taste. And there we go. There's 3 drills in shot and there are 3 miners in shot. So I'm now going to add a few glitches and video overlays to the very, very top compositions. I'm going to add a few time co-flashes, a few flash frames, just to kind of spice up the overall image. All it is a matter of dragging them on top of your image, mess around with the blender mode, maybe overlay, screen. Those are usually good ones to start with. And then that's looking pretty good though. I'm pretty happy with that. There's only one more thing I want to add, because in the original idea, we knew we wanted to kind of have miners, an oil refinery, and going onto the big city with the oil. So what I think we need to do is we need to add, right at the end of the composition, let's add some buildings. So I'm now going to make a new composition. I'm going to call it buildings, and I'm going to make it a lot longer than it is high, because we need a lot of buildings to pass the foreground of the image. So I'm going to add in my buildings, and I'm going to add in my skyscraper, and I'm going to like tweak the size in of the 3 buildings I've got, kind of flip them spatially, just because I don't want to have to go and find loads and loads of images. And I think repeating the same 3 buildings and this skyscraper will actually be more than sufficient for what we need. Deposit these together, that'll be good. Lovely. So now that we've tweaked our foreground building composition to our taste, now it really is a matter of, in the same way that we've done with everything else, we're just going to bring that into our top composition, our chapter 5 slate 1. We're going to turn on the 3D effect, and we're also going to turn on the motion blur, and we're going to parent it to the train track, and then just shuffle it around in 3D space until it looks until it's in a position that makes sense. And I'm going to put it a little bit further to the end of the train track, so the buildings don't come in until quite a lot later. So let's see what that looks like once they're in position. Okay, so now the buildings are in position. As you can see, they pass straight in front of the camera right at the end of this particular slate, which will probably leave us a great opportunity to add a transition there into the next slate. But there we have it, guys. That is the first of our slates complete for the story animation. It's a bit of an involved one, but hopefully you can see that it really is just a matter of compounding different effects that we've already spoke about, and just kind of applying them consistently throughout your composition. The main thing I'd say is just make sure you remain organized and try and put as much planning as you can ahead of animating, because as soon as you're in the thick of it, it really is hard to kind of course correct. So I'll see you in the next video, where we're going to look at a map animation for slate 2.